Yashomati Nandana Brajaboranagara Yashomati Nandana Jai Kunja Vihari. Salakaya Tamyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Adunulambita Bhujo Kanakabadatu Sankirtanaya Kapitaro Kamalaya Tattu Vishwambaro Dvijagaro Yugadharma Karo Vande Jagatpriyakaro Karunavotaro Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sahodito Gauraya Pushpabando Chitra Sambhodho Vandeham Shri Ramakrishna Abhaya Charanasako Sukado Paramanando Sundaro Svabhapriyo He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dīnabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopikananda Radha Namaste Tavakanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusudeki Namami Hriye Shri Shri Gauranga Maharaj Jai Guru Vishnu Guru Jai Guru Bhakti Vrinda Jai Guru Premanand. Any questions tonight?
I have a question. It's from the classes at the campground when you were getting, so I've heard only bits, so I don't know. Maybe it's already answered. I think I've heard you saying something about Paramatma being really compassionate towards Tadashta Shakti and at the same time being neutral to it. So I was wondering if you could say something about it more. Like I said, I don't know if I caught, caught on the bits, so maybe I messed up.
Well, it's a big topic, but try to be brief. And the idea, first, I think that's important to understand is that the Godhead in any form as Bhagavan, Paramatma, Brahman, Swami Bhagavan, Sri Krishna. They are all transcendental to material nature. And so they are not privy to the direct experience of the suffering and enjoyment of material existence. They have no experience of it. That is all an influence of the Maya Shakti. And God, it is transcendent to the Maya Shakti. If the Godhead were subject to the experience of material suffering and enjoyment, then he wouldn't be in a position to be the savior of those of us who are under this influence which arises out of ignorance. So it's important to underscore the transcendence of the Godhead in terms of our salvation, which comes from beyond our present condition. In our present condition of imperfection, we need the ingress of perfection. So the problem now, that we just made a point that's fairly easy to digest, the problem then that arises theologically is that having distanced God from the world of our experience, as we have for all the good reasons mentioned, there are more, but I'm being brief. What impetus does he have to be involved with us at all? He's not privy to our experience. And with regard to compassion in particular, then it's much more easy, let's say, to be compassionate to someone with regard to their condition if you have direct experience of the condition. So he doesn't. That said, he does have indirect knowledge, I should say, about the nature of our condition. And so as much as that could be an impetus for God's compassion for the suffering of people in the world, is as much as he's driven by the plight of the Vadajiva. It's not very much, because what he is driven by and his entire emotional life derives from is his relationship with his devotees. So he has a very, very rich emotional life under the influence of his Swarup Shakti. If you don't have this Swarup Shakti in the picture, a lot of theologies don't. So it becomes problematic because God is aloof. He has no material emotions of the happiness and the stress of ours. But he has no, that those being the only emotions, if you will. What's his emotional life like? He's kind of like a stone. Right? But with the Swarup Shakti, he has a very, very rich emotional life that our material emotional life is kind of a reflection of. So it's a nice feature of Gaudiya Vaishnava theology that it enables God to have this very rich emotional life and some desirable, therefore, to associate with. Someone that you can get really close to. So it's a real point to underscore in Gaudiya Vaishnava. What makes Krishna attractive is his attraction to his devotees, which is where his emotional life derives from. So he's not being driven by the hunger of the world, by the wars of the world, by the factory farms of the world. That's not driving him. It's not his emotional life. He knows the mechanism behind all these forms of suffering, it's ignorance and so forth, and so on. But to give an example I've given before, we're human beings. It's a relative limited analogy, but we know that bugs suffer, at least we think they do. It doesn't look very good when they smash on our windshield. But it's not like we're stopping the car and getting out, and having a funeral or starting the campaign. It may come, I don't know, but for save the bugs. So, a Jain idea or maybe a vegan idea is something along these lines that causes as little harm as possible, but that as little as harm as possible makes the whole thing very relative, because what you think is possible depends on your values, the larger picture of the life that you live in. Somebody might say, how can you possibly drive a car? Well, come on, I have to drive. No, you don't have to drive a car. You didn't. If you were really compassionate, you wouldn't drive a car. I mean, I think someone could make an argument how that is playing into the whole industrial society and blah, 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 and where everybody goes. So everybody's drawing the line somewhere is the point. We're fortunate to have a philosophy and a theology that is a much larger picture, in which things like nonviolence, compassion, service, and so forth are included. You may find them in a philosophy like Jainism, where they're wearing a mask so they don't breathe any bugs. You've seen that. So veganism is, sometimes a little harsh on moralizing towards us, but it tends to be, because it's a smaller picture. It doesn't have a theology. It doesn't have a transcendent feature to its whole picture. And incidentally, of course, that's not something to trivialize. The difference between the moral and the transcendent realm by saying, oh yeah, these devotees are transcendental, oh yeah, right, and they're here. They may not be very transcendental, some of them, but they're living in a worldview in which that is very much part of it, and in the context of that larger worldview, they're nonviolent, they do service to God, and some respects to humanity, obviously, as well. So it's not something to trivialize. Otherwise, you end up trying to find the capital good inside of the small good, and that becomes, from the bhakti perspective, if your bhakti is like that, in other words, if your bhakti is too much preoccupied with the moral realm, that it's starting to define the good of the Godhead in relation to my moral determinations of what is good. I'm starting to make my sense of the moral good what the capital G good constitutes. And that's a big mistake. Now you've got, in the context of bhakti, you've got bhakti karma anavritam, covered by karma, where you think that unless I act in this way, particular way, morally, my bhakti will be, encumbered. There may be some bhakti, some morality within the angas of bhakti. We live a moral life and so on and so forth. But the realm of karma and the transcendent realm, they're really two different realms, and they do join to some extent, and they do depart to some extent. So I think God wouldn't want this, because I don't think it's good. And inside of a smaller world, people, there's a whole bigger picture that's not being taken into consideration. So, but unless somebody has some really deeper sense of that, then the moral good is going to prevail in their sensibilities, which, as I've said many times, and I just pointed out here as well, I think is a realm where you can't arrive at it perfectly. The moral quandaries are you can be really sure about something, but it's very hard to find an absolute in morals. The moral world, there are always extenuating circumstances, and things change as well. And somebody was talking about you shouldn't take cows from a dairy unless they're cows that are not in milk, because then if you save cows that are in milk because you want to drink milk, which is bad for you, and it's bad for your health, which is an opinion, okay? It's not my opinion, but it's some people's opinion, then, which is relative. It's just nothing like, getting on the altar or the podium and, giving the absolutes about what's healthy to eat. And the fact is everybody's different, everybody's composition is different and so forth, and there may be some general principles, but anyway, it's very relative. So if you're absolutely sure that milk is bad to drink, you bring into question then the whole concept of domestic animals with regard to cows, or let's say goats. I think there's a real big place in the world for domestication of animals, and I think there's a really complementary relationship, if done properly, between humans and animals, where they both gain from one another and learn from one another as well. And this is, of course, the example of the Krishna Lila. So if you want to, mandate that milk is bad for your health, tell it to Krishna. I don't personally agree with that, but that may help to drive your engine. And somebody was saying, well, if you take a cow from the dairy because you're addicted to milk, and on the pretext, more or less, that was saving them, you really wanted to save them, why did you take a sick old cow that was about ready to get slaughtered? Well, again, because we're not vegans, we do drink milk. We think milk is good for you. And what are we supposed to do? Find a cow in the woods? Where do you get them from? If I don't get one from the dairy, where am I supposed to get one? If I get a dry one, and I believe that milk is good for me, and I believe that cows like to give milk, and I believe that cows like to have calves, then what do I do? Then I've got to go find a bull somewhere. I've got to find a wild bull now. Then I've got to bring them together, and I've got to mate them, and then you're perpetuating, by breeding, they're against that too, right? So, okay, it's a different philosophy, we respect, you're trying to do good, you have good intentions, you want to be compassionate and nonviolent. We're doing so in the context of a larger worldview. And, like here at Sour Drive, we've got 9 cows. 5 of them are not milking, and 4 of them are. And you could say, if you were really compassionate, you wouldn't have taken them from the dairy, but we did get our cows that are milking from the dairy when they were in milk. I don't know, they were 3-4 months into their lactation. You have to find a dairy that's willing to even sell the cow, and so forth. So, fine, you think that you would have done, someone may think they may have done more because of being kind to cows, let's say. How we're talking about it now, by just not eating milk or any milk products. We'll tell it to Ujjwala. Tell it to the Mangala. I don't know if they agree with you, because if I agree with you, they'd be dead right now. So I I don't think they'll agree with you, and I don't agree with that. And we had a very nice situation for the cows. We were taking care of them. And another way, we set an example. We set an example too. People could have a cow. People should have some land. They should have a cow. And so let more people in Western North Carolina see this idea and see how they could have their own milk. If they don't, they could have a little more. They could share with neighbors and make a little income for themselves, have cottage industry, and each people taking care of cows here and there. When you get married, you can give a cow, you know, so you don't have to get it from the dairy, but then you breed. But, you know, so you start, there's an idea of starting a different culture, an agrarian culture. I mean, you know, where are you going to go with it all? You know, fine, but by campaigning and so forth for a vegan world and so forth, it's got huge, larger issues. Even, you know, it's part of the larger issue of you step down here, as I say, it's going to go up here. It's the moral world. It's the material world. So. That said, as I'm saying, I kind of got off on a tangent, but what's not driving Krishna's engine is the various sufferings and joys of the material world. The happiness that we create by something that we do materially doesn't do anything for Krishna. It's just the other side of suffering. So you save all the plants and trees and, you know, stuff. I mean, I'm for that, but I understand that I'm not going to give my whole life to that because it's not a comprehensive approach to the problem. You know, I suggested this one person. You might think, maybe you've already thought of it, but you might think maybe you should stop eating vegetables that have been grown with the help of animal manure. Problem. You might end up pretty hungry here after we keep going. We keep looking at it from every angle. I mean, you have to kill to live. So I mean, yes, you have to, and then you have to draw the line somewhere. So you're going to draw the line within the context of your worldview. And there's more to being compassionate, for example, to an animal than saving its life. We should try to do that too. When we do, as much as we can, we spend thousands of dollars here to have pastures, to turn forests into pastures, to build barns, to and produce feed and to buy feed and to provide medical treatment and so forth for these cows. And so, you know, you're shopping Whole Foods, you know, and eating almond, drinking almond milk, you know, and moralizing. We don't, you know, we're part of the problem. I just really don't agree with that. But at any rate, it's a good thing. People do what they're going to do and think what they're going to think, and within the context of their ability to look at the problems, they try to do the best thing. I respect the sincerity and so forth. But this philosophy is a little deeper than a number of people who are involved in it realize what it is. And you can get a real kind of superficial understanding of it and think you know what it means to please Krishna, and end up going on a campaign, you know, to you know, do a fly paper, whatever. I'm not use it, but or whatever, you know, where now it's, you know, being reported as if we didn't know, but I mean, the scientific community. Insects have consciousness and a sense of ego and so forth. Well, now just stop killing insects or whatever, you know. Obviously, somebody draws a line. They think, well, the nervous system isn't developed. They can't feel pain as much. And that's the argument for eating from the vegetable plant world, right? Less harm and so forth. I mean, I agree with that argument. To an extent, but at any rate, we're living in a bigger picture. In that bigger picture, my point is, in relative to your question, is that these happies and joys, what we think is a big success and will please Krishna because we just made somebody materially happy, doesn't really do anything for them. He has no experience of the happiness and distress of material life, which is all ignorance. So something else is driving him, and that's called bhakti. And this is his internal shakti, and it's so powerful that it completely overwhelms him. The point of Krishna as the son of Yashoda, as the cowherd friend of Sri Ram, as the mother of Radha, means this the power of bhakti, turning God into this. It's like so powerful. He has no time to think about, the fact that insects are suffering. And now, for ourselves, we know that insects are suffering. I mean, kind of. We can figure it out, kind of like, well, all right, yeah, if you got hit by a car, their bodies are different, but anyway, it must hurt, and they died, and so forth. We see it all the time. It's not driving our lives, right? We've got our own lives, materially speaking. It's not driving. So many things are happening on so many levels, and it's not driving our life. Well, why some things aren't? Deforestation or factory farms, they're closer to us for different reasons. Other people have other reasons. You can think your reasons are the best. I hope you do. Otherwise, why you're doing it. But whether they are, there's so much to debate about that. It's all the relative world. And again, you press down here, it comes up over there. So at any rate, what's driving Krishna is bhakti. And exactly what bhakti is, well, it's not just simple word devotion. Therefore, there's a whole bhakti sandarbha, a whole treatise on bhakti. There's a whole bhakti rasamrita sindhu, Rupa Goswami. There's Narada Bhakti Sutra. What does bhakti actually constitute? In the context of that, there's a theological explanation of what is Bhagavan. The object of bhakti has to be included. What is this Rupa Shakti that bhakti is constituted of? It's important to understand these things, so we talk about them, so that we can actually be involved in the inner life. God has some access to it, get tuned into it, and then he turns his attention to us and so forth. You're going to get a lot of his attention by various material campaigns for improving the material condition of people, animals, plants, changing governments, and so on and so forth. It may be noble on some level, and so that it's just not like Krishna's in the arms of Radharani. And what does that mean? You have to understand that. That's why it's important to understand the scripture, because it changes our whole sense of who we are, what we are. I was saying yesterday, the tattva starts to form your swarup. Don't separate the tattva from the bhava. It's the ground on which the bhava is manifesting. So you have a certain idea of yourself, what's good, what's bad, what's important, what's not. Scriptures are supposed to hone that in such a way that you come to a different sense of self that you could not have arrived at on your own. That's the purpose of the scripture. We have a mind, we have intelligence to figure out what's good, what's bad, what's the best thing to do, so on. So we can only go so far with that. And sometimes the scriptural argument will contradict what we think is the best, and you'll think, well, yeah, you talk about transcendence, but meanwhile, what about this? What about that? Well, okay, if you don't encourage people to do the things that they do that are good, but if they can't understand why we're not involved in them, then they need more eligibility, they need more association, they need more time. And it's a pity, but so at any rate, it's important to understand this about God. And now that said, God is compassionate, and all compassion is derived from God. So his devotees are the manifestation of his Kripa Shakti. So through them, they share devotion, and often, they have experience in material suffering. So that naturally they're kind-hearted. They're kind-hearted towards other people, towards animals. According to Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu of Rupa Goswami, who we revere as one of our founding acharyas, and Jiva Goswami, quoting, I think, from maybe the Tantra, some scratching the necks of cows, giving them fresh fodder. This is even a form of bhakti. like worshiping sacred trees, like the Vanya is included in this. So you have to have domesticated animals to do that. So there's a place for it. It's the beginning really of civilization, the meeting of the wild and the humans, where the wild becomes a little human and the humans become a little less wild. Hunters and gatherers are more wild than those who take care of animals and till the fields and grow, and they're smarter too. The growers rather than hunters. So the animals help them to do that. They help the cow, for example, helps the human to become less wild. That's the meeting point. As I see it, they're out hunting and gathering, and the animals are out there also. So there's this meeting point, domestication. Some animals lend themselves to that. And then man is becoming kinder. He's becoming more intelligent and using a bow, for example, to till the field rather than just to have a carcass over the winter and be hungry again, when spring comes, whatever. So there's a place for it. And I'm scratching the neck soon, so as he said. So there's a big place for that, and we're devotees who are compassionate towards cows, towards suffering people in all conditions. And we do what we can in the context of bhakti to serve Krishna and overflow that, to help people with vivadaya, with kind to people, in the context of our entire worldview. And so we, as devotees in particular, are the extension of Krishna's compassion. Krishna is compassionate, but because he's completely wrapped up by his devotees, his compassion is directly focused, and that quality in him is drawn upon by his devotees. It's focused on and drawn upon by his devotees. So his whole capacity to be compassionate personally is completely consumed by his devotees, many of whom are in need of progressing in bhakti, who are longing for him and so forth. And so he comes to the world, for them. He comes to the world for those sadhakas who can no longer live without him. And they think, oh, he's so compassionate. He came, descended for me. And the overflow of that, of course, is that people hear about Krishna. He comes, the devotees talk about him, books are written, and so on and so forth. And so Krishna's compassion is completely, his whole life is consumed by his devotees. So all of his compassion is taken up by them. Then they, in turn, become the instruments through which his compassion is extended further outside of the realm of bhakti, by being kind to people and sharing bhakti with them, or empathizing with them because of having had experience of material suffering themselves, being familiar with it. So God is compassionate to the common people. He does care about them through the medium of his devotees. That's how his compassion is shared in the world. And then therefore compassion is a secondary quality of bhakti that's experienced in relation to the world, or expressed as in relation to the world through the devotees, not directly through Bhagavan. So it's important to please the devotees. Not to rub them the wrong way. So tell them what the philosophy is, so women might know a little bit better. So that said, because God has knowledge of the suffering, no experience, but knowledge of the suffering in the world, we can say that there is some indirect cause rising from the world for him to express compassion. Some indirect cause. It's not what drives his engine. He's completely consumed by the bhakti, but he has knowledge, and so therefore, we may reason, and some acharyas have at times, therefore there's the world. What does it mean, therefore, is the world? The world is made manifest because if the world is not made manifest, the Tasta Jiva have no opportunity to attain salvation. They need the body. They need the mind. And so the world is manifest. In his sleep, indirectly. Krishna is not, directly involved. Through his Paramatma feature, he is. So this is your question. So the Paramatma feature of the Godhead is the feature of the Godhead that presides over the Maya Shakti and the Tatastha Shakti. That's his jurisdiction. And so the indirect knowledge of people's suffering is a little, maybe you might say, a little more influence on him than does on Narayan and Vaikuntha. He's the form to facilitate any desire that Narayan might have to bestow mukti. I mean, typically he comes in different avatars and bestows mukti upon the devotees. So he bestows it upon, that's who he interacts with. See, Krishna has to derive his pleasure from within himself, otherwise he's not Atmaram, he has to go outside of himself. The Swarup Shakti is like his own self, it's called Swarup Shakti. So he always stays within the orbit of the Swarup Shakti. We were talking about the other day, he kills demons or something like that, but that in the context of protecting his devotees. He wants to protect the devotees of Braj, therefore he fights with Jarasandha, so they won't come into Braj. That's what, he's interacting with those people, but only in the context of bhakti. Anyway, so the Paramatma feature is more neutral than Bhagavan, who's more partial, because Bhagavan is involved in vilas, in lila, in play with his devotees. So he's partial to them. The power of their love is such. Typically the Paramatma as the object of love is the object of love for what? For Shantarasa or yogis. Yogis, in the highest sense, Ishwar Pranidhana has become the focus of in their yoga. Through yoga, bhakti mixed with yoga, they can attain as high as Shantarasa. Which is rasa, it's a form of prema, but it's not interested in Krishna's pastimes. It's not interested in Krishna's qualities. It's just interested in the form of Krishna. Like Catholics have a term, the beatific vision. I've kind of related these two Catholics, saints, Shantaras, Bhaktas. They're Bhaktas, right? But if you look carefully, you could make a case that their experience is what we call Shantarasa, now terminology. And the Shantarasa is kind of a neutral affair compared to Dasya Bhakti. And so Paramatma is kind of neutral. Less influenced by the partiality that Bhakti is characterized by. Ram Bhakti, Krishna Bhakti, Shakya Bhakti, Madhurya Bhakti, Vatsalya Bhakti, the different types of Bhakti. And they have slightly different manifestations of Krishna or the Godhead that correspond with them. And there's this partiality that makes up the world of Vaikuntha. Partial in Shringa, partial in Rama, partial in Krishna. Paramatma is more like overseer, God, and passive, and so passive adoration. Now, when this is a feature of Narayan, of course, you can have Shantarasa, and you would have Shantarasa in Vaikuntha. This Narayan manifests as the Paramatma, Mahavishnu, to, as I say, correspond with this desire to give mukti. There's always sadhakas in the world. There's two forces in the world. Karma is driving the world, and there's bhakti in the world. It has no beginning. world has no beginning, karma has no beginning, bhakti has no, there's always bhakti in the world. And so, to again bestow bhakti, again he comes, the avatars, he descends. But the Paramatma himself is more kind of neutral and more in relation to this world than, say, Krishna, for example, in Goloka. Knowledge of the suffering of the world, maybe a little more pressing, and therefore manifest the world. So that it's really indirect, isn't it? So he manifests the world. Everybody's thinking that's the problem, the world. No, it's a solution. There is such a thing as a tatasta jiva. It needs a world that it can, be itself, pursue its desires, and have the opportunity for bhakti, and so forth. So it's that's why it's a beautiful thing. He makes the world manifest out of indirect. Vishnu says this in one place in Bhagavatam, in his commentary. I forget the verse, but he makes the world because without the world, the jivas wouldn't have bodies in which they could have the opportunity to pursue bhakti, make a remedy to their situation, and obtain salvation, obtain mukti. So he's a little more involved with the material condition and remedying it than Krishna or even Narayan, Vaikuntha, or Mahavaikuntha of Goloka. You asked about compassion and being impartial. He's impartial in the way that I'm saying that he tends, as much as his attention is taken in any way by indirect knowledge of the suffering of the jivas and arranging a situation to that required to remedy it. He's impartial in that it's for everybody. It's not one over another. It's for everybody, the whole world, for all the jivas. Impartial in that way. In all conditions, and he's in everyone's heart, witnessing. Want to do that? Okay. We do that. You go there, he goes with everywhere. You have a desire, he sanctions, it happens. He impartially steps back for karma. Karma has its place. Mahashakti has its place. Hands up. Impartial. He's just, in other words. Okay, if he was taken from the work environment, the environment wants to get back, he's not going to interfere, he's just. But then in the form of avatar, there's through the devotees, I should say, there's the bestowing of bhakti and there's mercy. So he's just and he's merciful, both at the same time. But because the Paramatma is closer to the world, he manifests the world, and so forth. You can say that he is more, the manifestation of divinity that's more influenced by indirect knowledge of the suffering. He's not experiencing suffering, indirect knowledge of it, and seeks to bring about a remedy more driven by that. It's not like Paramatma is, having all these fantastic pastimes with Prema Madhurya, Lila Madhurya. Is like completely consume him. He's presiding over the material world, so it goes on, so on and so forth. So this is how he's both more related to the world and kind of driven by compassion to some extent, but impartial at the same time. Whoa. Yes.
So I was thinking about how Krishna takes the place of Paramatma in Asakti. So Krishna comes for his devotees. So we get a lot of reciprocation in the very beginning of our bhakti, in synchronicities and so many things that we attribute to Krishna. So this is Krishna's mercy, or Krishna answered my prayers. So is that Krishna, or is it bhakti that's reciprocating in those early?
It's Krishna. Krishna. That's what you're talking to. That's what you're asking. He has that capacity. Is the point made by Vishnu Shabbat. He is omniscient, even though he is absorbed and lost in the forgetfulness of his godhood in the Leela. At the same time, he didn't lose his position as God. And if the prayers of his sadhakas are sincere enough, they can get his attention. They can draw on his omniscient capacity. And hear the prayer. Now, I raised the question in my Shastakam, and you read it, that what kind of sadhakas can get Krishna's attention, just to emphasize the idea that we should be serious sadhakas if we expect to get Krishna's attention. But theoretically, yes, it's good to think like that, not that you think that I'm praying to the Paramatma. I said this the other night, it's the same thing. We don't meditate on the world as described in the 5th canto as a meditation on God. We don't tend to be preoccupied with the Virata Rupa, but with Bhagwan, and not with Narayan or Paramatma, but with Radha and Radha, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
My question was about prayer. So, just generally, people pray. Are they praying to Paramatma? If a serious sadhak is praying, their prayers go to Krishna.
You're praying. Who's in your heart? Paramatma or Krishna?
Krishna.
Then who are you going to pray to? Krishna. Yam Shama Sundaram.
But like a Christian, if they're, are they?
An ordinary.
Yeah. Their prayers just go to Jesus.
Yeah, I guess if they pray to Jesus, that's where they go, wherever he is, whatever his conception is, and they become part of that. We have very specific ideas about God, the whole theory of his emotional life, his Rup Shakti, as I mentioned, rasa, and so forth. So it's very specific, and specificity is very much would seem a requirement for loving. The more you know about someone, the more specifics, and if they're all beautiful, the more they'll be lovable. So, and there may be other traditions where the concept of God is strong, but more general, more vague, and that, from our perspective, then that would be moving more towards a Paramatma manifestation of the divinity, the Lord of the world. Without much to say about what's beyond it, so to speak. Any question too?
When we talk about, you mentioned the yogis and their involvement, and you mentioned Baba. They have Baba. So, first of all, just a general, if you could get some general indication of what kind of taste is there in passive adoration, wonder, and also if you give some indication, well, if you've explained to us that Baba drives the Siddha Deha, our feelings of love come out in a physical, well, not physical, but a spiritual form. What kind of spiritual form would Siddha Deha give us? Would Santa give to somebody who has simply that?
Yeah.
There's no service even.
Therefore, there are people in Vaikuntha meditating. They have forms of rishis that are those meditate. The Goswami in Bhakti Smriti Sindhu gives the Anubhavs, the Sattvika Bhavs, Sanchari Bhavs, the Shantarasa, all related to the Paramatma, for reference there. And the basic qualities of Shantarasa are two: complete detachment, so there's no material desire, and some attachment to Bhagavan, but stop there. There's no desire to serve, to So it's really kind of like laid down. It's the one rasa, from the Kodi perspective, it's the one rasa that through association you can change. You can come from Shanta rasa to Dasi rasa if you have that kind of association with Sakya rasa. Whereas if you're in Sakya rasa, it's not going to change. So it's a neutral.
Even in Vaikuntha?
I don't know about Vaikuntha. I wouldn't say that people change there, but it's specifically mentioned by Rupa Goswami, whereas it's not mentioned in that way in relation to the other rasas changing. So I would imagine when we think of relative to here, by association, he kind of goes up the scale, something like that. But yeah, it's very kind of foreign to us, isn't it? That shows how you've been influenced by Bhakti and Shantarasa is kind of weird. How does it fit in? Kind of thing. But yeah, there's some people that in Vaikuntha they just meditate. It's a real interesting place. I mean, there's all kinds of different possibilities there. There are people there who go there because they have desires, and they end up desiring, instead of material things, to have a body like mine, instead of to have prem for Narayan. So they're driven by that. These are the perks of Vaikuntha. They're driven by that. So it's a mixed, kind of form of bhakti, and they arrive at a certain status in Vaikuntha, but they're different than those who are driven by prem and the perks, if you will, the same body, sarupya, salokya, samupya, sarasvita, are like secondary. It said they have some interest in those things for service, but their bhakti is driven by prem. So yeah, it's an easier place to attain in one sense, and there's other different possibilities. But if you've been touched by Mahaprabhu, then it's difficult to relate to that. I told something I heard long ago when I was young in New Dwarka, and a young devotee, one fellow came up to me, older devotee, and said, I don't know what drove him to say this, but he said, very few people go to Goloka. Most people go to Vaikuntha. It's very rare to go to Goloka. It's like, I was telling me, just get used to it, you're probably going to Vaikuntha. And I would cry when I heard that. And then when I used to the with me, this is probably calling. I couldn't accept it. So that would be my destination. So it's a good spirit to have. That's what Mahaprabhu, that's the influence of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Our Guru Parampara. So if you have that kind of association, you can suddenly find, hey, look, I have this Rag Marg orientation. People saying, you better be going on the Rag Marg, this, and you don't know much about it and so forth. You look carefully and you can see, actually, you've already been influenced by that. This is your, some details you don't know, but that you're already oriented there. Everything's okay. You have a good guide in the Gaudiya Guru Parampara. These things have been coming into the heart, so forth, due course of time. Interest will come appropriate to your eligibility to incorporate certain practices and so forth. You get a head full of information and then try to jump and learn about the middle and jump and fall on your butt. So, like I said, okay, you want a mango? Here's a shovel. Try that. Nobody's talking about it. I want a mango. Dig a shovel. Come back tomorrow when you could dig the hole. Then you give them a seed. What? Okay. Next day, buried it now. You just told me to dug a hole. Now you're telling me to fill it up. What? Well, the screw. The mango. So, you have to do all those things. Growth, take time. Yes.
Do you think all the Christian mystics are in the Shanta Ras? Is that what
I don't know enough
pursuing?
about them but I would. My guess is that they're very They're much renowned, like the Desert Fathers. Even you take like these St. John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila, and so forth, which sometimes people try to theologize, make a connection with their orientation and the Madhurya Rasa of like Bhakti, but it really doesn't play out well, as far as I can say, with the little bit I know about it. I mean, for example, the Teresa of Avila, they were like the brides of Christ.
Right.
Bhaktisiddhanta Commentator says you can't be a bride of the Guru. Christ is the Guru, who's sacrificing for God the Father. So he didn't see it to be. Now Bhakti Vinod is talk sometime more broadly in his preaching strategy, more generously about Christianity. We find this in Christianity. We find the brotherly love in Christianity. You know. But I think he said no, not Madhurya Rasa. Mahaprabhu brings that, something like that.
It seems like Saint Teresa of Lisieux was more in Dasya Rasa. I mean, she just wanted to serve. And she said, "Let my heaven be on earth." So I don't want to go to heaven and just relax and enjoy. There's no service for me there. I'd rather stay here where I can serve.
Sounds like a Dasya.
Yeah.
Bhakta. Yeah, I don't know much enough about that. I was raised as a Catholic. My confirmation name was Francis.
Oh.
At 12, you pick a name. It's just of those saints. I like Saint Francis. Yeah.
This is just a different topic, but I don't know if have you ever read Eric Fromm's The Art of Love? His
I never read parts of it.
yeah, because I'm pretty sure it's in this book where he categorizes love in different ways, and I couldn't quite get where he was going with it. But one thing that stood out is he had a whole chapter, he went on at length about brotherly love, how it's lacking in the society, and the friendship of two males is really important, and it should be, it's been lost in society, and it has created, he describes what kind of problems it creates in society. He was like focused on a whole chapter and a half about it. He keeps bringing it up in the book, and it just was, I thought you'd be interested in looking at it for that reason.
Yeah. Well, we all want to change the world. And all you need is love. But what is it? That's a big question, right? Everybody has an idea what love is, but maybe it's not. Yes.
Yesterday, you said that the ways that we can avoid falsities are sadhusanga.
You're talking too fast.
Sorry.
I'm understanding.
Yesterday, you mentioned ways to avoid falsities. You mentioned sadhusanga, listening to your guru, and that wrong conceptions foster wrong practice. So what can we do for people in our sangha, or even other devotees, to help them get out of that?
Well, you could bring Balaram to the temple at night.
I wasn't talking about.
Or you need help.
Okay. I'm gonna get yelled at when I get home for that. I'll give them your number. How can you do that?
How can you help them to avoid misunderstandings?
Yeah, if you see them doing something that you know is gonna greatly harm their bhakti.
Well, it depends. Preaching is an art, so you have to understand people, and it might be one thing for one person, one thing for another person. It might be the best thing just to leave somebody alone, not do anything. That might be the best thing you can do. If you realize, you see that, and you just let them go, and then because they, sometimes people leave a mission, and so left, and we've been in touch with Guru Maharaj. I said, no, I don't think he wants to be in touch. And so if I go try to get in touch with him, it's just, that's not good. He's going to, push he or she away or something. So to people that are open all the time and so forth. So sometimes, even with talking with people, you might want to tell them about Krishna and just realize, well, just listen to them, they just want to talk. And he's not interested, and so you just nice to them, and you go in, who's a really nice guy, that guy. That's good for them if you're actually a devotee. So and then there may be situations where, there was, here I'll give you another example on the other end of the spectrum. Srila Prabhupada Maharaj tells the story of how he was, Bhaktisiddhanta was up in his room, and down at the gate, there was one brahmachari who was leaving, the mission, and another brahmachari grabbed the gate here and here, with him in between, was holding it like this and preaching to him. Wouldn't let him go. Bhaktisiddhanta then said, bring that guy up and gave him some house. So, I mean, there may be a place for that too, but it's an art to understand that. And you have to see how you're going to have a positive influence, even a little positive influence. Sometimes, as I say, you can have the best positive influence by saying nothing. And sometimes you can say a lot and have good influence. So it's hard to give an answer to all circumstances. I can't, but it's good that you have that desire naturally. So you can try it and you can learn trial and error and see how you're effective. And sometimes you may not be effective, and learn from that. I'm a pretty good preacher type person. I learned a lot from listening to people going out and saying the wrong things, and nothing worked, and I go back and thinking about it, and my days of selling books and so forth. So it takes practice. It's an art. But to have the desire to help devotees, I've said before, it's important, it's good. I've said before, I use the term teachable moment. We kind of got to look for a creative teachable moment. And when you see it, then okay, there's my opening. I go through that. You go right there, and you come back up. If you don't have the teachable window moment, then it's best probably just, as I say, wait for one, try to orchestrate one. So, all right. Shri Gaurana Madhavati Jai.
Bhaktivedanta Tripurari Swami Maharaj, Gurudev Ki Jai.
Are you going there tonight, or are you going
We're
home?
reading from, no,